Hmm. Hey everybody, I hope you can see this. Hey everybody, hope you're well today. It's Tuesday. World Series is about to come on. Want to share something with you I think is quite fascinating and provides, if you will, a lens into how I believe society is being reshaped by media and how media is reshaping society, and how there are some people who don't get that we're really in a place of conversation, and they would rather hide in the shadows, even though their own actions put them out in the public. Let me explain. And also something else. I'll just cut to the real chase. I don't like people trying to come off as if they are bullying me for attacking institutions that present a racist lens towards someone black. And let me explain what's going on. I know it's a little bit convoluted, but it started with a fascinating email that I got um, earlier today, and it's from a man by the name of Tyron Jordan. I'm not going to show you the email because I want to protect the person's email address and uh, that sort of thing. I'm not trying to dox him, as they say. That's not my point at all. And I hope it isn't taken that way. It says, "Good morning. How is that a racist attack on Derreck Johnson? Dude, not every situation where a can of color is scrutinized is not a racist attack." And then he provides a link to what I wrote. And if you don't know the situation, basically, Derreck Johnson is a candidate for the at-large city council seat that is currently held by Oakland Councilmember Rebecca Kaplan. And I support Rebecca's reelection. However, I didn't like that Oaklandside pointedly went after him for not saying that, or not telling them, I guess, that his business went bankrupt. And more pointedly, they are apparently annoyed that he describes himself as a successful businessman. Me, when the East Bay Express said a couple of decades ago almost that my effort to bring the Super Bowl to Oakland failed, I took issue with that because it didn't list that we were one of 3 finalist cities out of 11 to get that far. In other words, there was no intent on Robert Gammon's part to congratulate what I did, and every intent to douse water on me in my effort. That's how I took it. That's one of many reasons why I went to establish my own media company. So here we are in the situation where we have Mr. Johnson, who's very proud of his chicken and waffles business that he held, hasn't told anyone who asked that anything other than the truth. And the truth is that he had that business. Fine. My constant issue with Derreck Johnson has nothing to do with that, and it has nothing to do with him personally. I simply hold that he needs some more seasoning in office before he can say he's ready to be a council member, and he has to understand governance. That's a key problem with a number of people running in this race, but I digress. So anyway, I wrote back. Tim, he wrote me from his iPhone, and he sent the email from his standard account, not his work account, but it was during the work day. All right. So I wrote back, the post explains in detail why it's racist. Moreover, there's no black media voice other than mine in Oakland. So you're constantly fed information that comes from a white lens, not this time. The Oakland Post has all white writers and editors, even though it's owned by Mr. Paul Cobb, who's black. And this gets to another issue that I'm not going to elaborate on much, but I'm really concerned that when I say Oakland only black voice, there are people who can have their own media who are black, and I mean own their own media, right? But they choose to not do that. Like I've said this before, I'll say this again. David D, as far as I'm concerned, is worth $6 million at least. He ought to have backing. He ought to have his own blog out there. He's got it. He's got his radio show, but his platform should be bigger than it is. And I'm not blaming him or anything else. I'm simply saying that the fact that he's not there is symptomatic of the kind of institutional racism that we all face. All of us. Okay? As far as I'm concerned, David D really is the number one black voice in Oakland in terms of media. Period. End of story. So when I say I'm the only one, I'm talking about from the perspective of a person who has their own platform that they own and that consistently publishes on a regular basis and actually has contractors. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm also putting that out there because I'm really concerned that the black voices that should be out there, they're speaking or not. And they're doing so under avenues of content distribution that are white owned. And so their voice is not completely free or as free as they would like for it to be because of that and because of the constraints that they face. Pay constraints, business constraints, ownership constraints, so on. All right. That's my point. So anyway, Tyson says, hi, thanks for your response. Wow, what not, but he said he wrote, wow, not even a salutation. Sorry. As an African-American male, I'm very much aware of media racial bias. If you're the only black media voice, we're in trouble because in the past you've given really bad candidates free passes. I'm thinking, I have. So this dude, think about that. This dude comes off with he's got an issue to start with. Okay. I've never met this issue. I don't even know this dude, but that's typical in my life because, hey, I walk through airports and be recognized. Happens a lot. Anyway, this dude obviously has an issue that I'm not aware of. Okay. But again, he writes, if you're the only black media voice, we're in trouble because in the past, you've given really bad candidates free passes. Example being, he only offers one, Assembly candidate Joel Young. I questioned Derreck Johnson. And see, let me get to this. Because I questioned Derreck Johnson because he claims to be a successful business owner and no longer even owns chicken and waffles. One would have to wonder why he could not be forthcoming about that. All right. Although white folks in the press will unfairly scrutinize candidates of color, black folks should not hesitate to scrutinize candidates of color as well as white candidates. He says, I said, also, if the issue is of all white writers and editors at the Post, what has Paul Cobb done to remedy the situation? Also, because one is black, does that not mean that? Also, because one is black, that does not mean it's a guarantee they will view things from a, quote, black lens, unquote. And that's sent from his iPhone. And I wrote, hello, my apology for coming off as rude. But as I write this, I'm also in pain to a small degree. I do have arthritis. So that informs what I write. Joel Young would completely disagree with you that I gave him a pass. Call him and ask him where that came from. I do not know. It was 2012. So there's much you either did not see or forgotten. I sent him 3 different videos. Joel Young, I'm not going to, out of respect for Joel, recount what was a painful situation for him. And I will say, however, that unlike a number of traditional publications, I'm only a person that actually vlogged about it. And I talked to Joel Young. I talked about how he was cleared of the charges that were brought against him. This is back in 2011, 2012. Okay, this is 2020. And I handled that correctly. But Joel Young will be the first to tell you that I did not give him a pass. He will be the first to tell you that I was perhaps too heavily handedly critical of him initially. And he would be the first to tell you that he would think I thought could have handled it better. That episode had a profound effect on how I see black folks in media and what I was doing both right and what I was doing wrong. And the problem is that some people, like, in my view, Tyson, I don't know Tyson. This is how he's coming off. All right. And I'll get to explain. They are their view of how blacks should be presented in media is to a degree clouded by what they see, which is a white lens. So much so that when they get a black lens that's actually critical of the white lens that's presented, it's shocking to them. It's shocking to a lot of people. People have no appreciation or understanding for how whitewashed our media has been. They're so used to it. It's like they're standing in a bread line in Eastern Europe before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And after the fall, they just don't know what to do because they have stood in bread lines for food that has been given to them all their lives. That's how this is, folks. It really is. So I wrote that the situation that in my case was multi-content. In other words, I wrote more than one item of content, unlike Oaklandside, which the quote reporter acted on a tip from a public person and then masked that. And rather than look at all the candidates to cover himself, just to make sure that it was fair, right? Looked at the Pacer court report that he was tipped off to and went from there. I said the white reporter has a history of this with blacks in politics and business in Oakland. So much so that I had made it my habit to counter what this person does, allowing, when it's necessary, allowing these negative images, to come out without a counter where it's appropriate. You know what happens, folks? Little by little, it gets us George Floyd. It gets us people in law enforcement who think it's okay to handle somebody black heavily handedly, so much so that it kills that person. And that's why I'm embarking on this, because it's very important for us to have counters. Just like we point out bad cops, we have to point out media that's going too far and being racist. Say, hey, you know what? Hold on a second. That's not a cool thing. All right. We all need to check each other. And we haven't had that. All right. And in my view, African American media should serve at that, even if it is to have a conversation about what something is that's racist and what it's not. My view is that institutional racism is the biggest problem today, because it's not where someone calls you a name, right? It's the structure and how the structure works against you. I mean, for example, I've talked about how I got a DUI and was body slammed on the hood of a car, highway patrol officer. And so no one bothered to check except my attorney, Bill Dubois. Hey, you know what? Did you calibrate the machine? And so I went through the DUI school, but I discovered going through the DUI school, the DUI school itself tries to make up reasons to keep you in the system. I mean, when you're done, you're done. Okay, you should be done. But they don't do that. And so if you're black and maybe you don't have enough money, you're intimidated by all this, you might wind up paying money you don't need to pay to that DUI school, all right? And no one has investigated that, which I think the Department of Justice ought to be looking at myself, okay? All right? So anyway, I wrote that, again, allowing these negative images little by little gets us George Floyd, and we ask what happened, and well, no one asked me. I said, in my case with Joel, I gave various signs of a complex story, and because I was then and now sensitive to how the white media is treating this, versus my more tech-based approach. He says, as for Paul, your question, he agrees that he should have black folks, and hopefully he should do something about that, so that the Oakland Post gets back to being really a true black voice that Oakland needs. And I love, as I said, wrote here, I love Paul a lot. I really do. And Paul sometimes likes to be contrary, even if it comes off like maybe he's not exactly going for folk, right? But Paul has a deep history in Oakland, and I hope that he understands this warm embrace that I'm giving and saying, hey, you know what? Rediscover that thing that was in you when you marched with Martin, you talked with him, and you were his friend. Be that person, because we need that person today. We don't need a situation where little by little black media is allowing a perspective that hurts blacks. Okay. So I sent that, and I wrote back that although Derreck, even though I do not support him, does not and should not be demonized for having financial problems. Doing that to someone is racist in this context. The fact is, he had a business that worked and it employed black ex-felons. Give him credit. Sorry, but Oaklandside took a white supremacist lens and went from there. I have, told people who spread that information around, don't send it to me. All right. I don't want to deal with it. So I didn't get, a follow-up. I told him, I said, hey, look, I found your question interesting. So I'm making this into a public vlog. Also, you work for the California Department of Justice. I happened to find that. But I also found something else. Okay. That was interesting. Oh, again, all this is like out there public. And because I thought, why would he accuse me of something that I didn't do? Right. And when you say that, I'm thinking, oh, dude, what's up there, right? Why you doing that? What's up there? What you doing there, right? And what I discovered was an entry that he made in the East Bay Express. That was quite interesting. It had to do, it went all the way back to 2013. And it had to do with AC Transit board member Joel Young may have profited from his official duties. Okay. And this was in the East Bay Express. And he says, smear campaign, really? I question the suggestion. My reason for being that having followed Mr. Young's race for state assembly in 2012, there seems to be somewhat of a pattern of questionable behavior as far as walking a straight ethical line. One may ask, what does one set of circumstances have to do with the other? And Mr. Jordan says that he would say it's a great deal. There is the possibility that the accusation made against Mr. Young using confidential information for professional and private gain could be false and could have been conjured up. But in this matter, the adage, where there's smoke, there is fire, is probably applicable. Also, to be honest, if it were a smear campaign, I don't know what anyone would have to gain from it. Oh, really? Mr. Young pretty much sabotaged and conducted a smear campaign against himself during his 2012. I mean, he writes a lot of stuff here, okay? And it keeps going on it. And then he writes, as an African-American male, I am disturbed by the assertion that the negative press that Joel Young has been receiving is racially motivated. Jeez. He says, it seems like the race card, as well as the blame others card, is at play. Folks, note, the race card was invented during the Reagan administration by white conservatives, all right, to shut up anybody that would point out institutional racism. I want Tyron, Jordan, and everyone watching this to know that. Don't stop using the term race card, because it means you really don't know where that came from, and you are trying to yourself shut up other people, generally black people, from discussing racism. Don't do that. All right? Tyron is obviously younger than I am. He's also new to Oakland. He's only been here since 2009. He served our country. Thank you very much. I'll get to how I know that in a moment, okay? Because in the way that I know that is he tried out to be in the police commission. That shows up in a standard search about him, okay? He's worked in the, let's see, okay, so he's been an Army guy, and that comes out from his application, which is public view. This isn't something that I had to ask for or sneak around and get, all right? He filed it May 30th, 2017, and lists himself as black and male, and he writes, here's a bit of information regarding my background and experiences for the consideration of the Police Commission Selection Committee. He says he's resided in Oakland since October 2009, holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in government from California University State Sacramento. He served us in the Army. Again, thank you for your service. 1997 to 2004. And he says a large part of his work experience has been in the legal field, and he's employed as a paralegal with the California Department of Justice Office of the Attorney General. And he said that his military experience presented him with many instances where the ability to assess a situation, the ability to assess a situation in a critical and objective manner, which I question. In addition, not only to assess situations objectively and critically, but with the goal of fairness in reaching conclusions. He says, my experience as a paralegal has helped me in sharpening my communication skills, organization skills, and being able to ask relevant questions of potential witnesses. He says the bulk of his work includes extensive research, drafting legal documents, particularly subpoenas, and requests for discovery material, in addition, trial preparation. That's a lot for a police commission. He says his community involvement includes being an active member of the Rotary Club, yay, and he's a member of a number of Rotary committees like Kinder Prep, Community Committee, and so on, all right? And then he talked about his most recent experience with the Oakland Police Department, which he says he was looking out of his window of the department when he noticed a guy wandering aimlessly, and he says he was quite concerned with his well-being, so he called the police department. Wow. He said 2 officers showed up after he called. He spoke with the individual in a very calm, concerned, respectful manner, with a very professional every level. He says he's heard negative things about OPD, but they're often 2 sides. That's true. He says the officers that he observed handled the situation very well. The guy was yelling at them, but because the officers handling the matter did not escalate, which is, I have to say, Oakland police are really great at de-escalation. He says the officers provided assistance and calmed the man down. He says he would like to ensure that such professionalism will continue to be the case. And so he tried to get on the Citizens Police Review Board. He was interviewed by the mayor and Peggy Moore for future consideration. And thanks. Okay. So this fellow's been active member of the Oakland community, reads like a nice guy, but he's got an aspect of him that I think he needs to be aware of, because it comes off as overzealous. And at a time when, for example, in Atlanta, we had 6 police officers beat up and basically torture 2 black college students around the time of the Black Lives Matter George Floyd protest, were they really even part of the protest? All right. And felt that they acted as if these officers, particularly the black officers, a sort of a carte blanche to be rough with them and violate their rights. At that time, I really questioned whether a person like Mr. Jordan, he has the right to do this, but his line of approach and behavior is consistently one where it's as if he wants to maintain the institution that has gotten us into trouble to this point, including stopping anybody, or at least dissuading them, in my case, from questioning an institution, the press, that has a habit of institutional racism. I mean, my point is, it's one thing to do that as a private citizen. When you reach out to me and you're with the Department of Justice, even as a paralegal, then I'm thinking all kinds of things. I'm thinking, hey, this is fun stuff, because I roll different from a lot of folks, as you can tell. All right. I am very used to black folks who don't want to take other black folks seriously, because also he's praised other elected officials who in one case, he praised an official in his writings that was involved with a city of Oakland ethics problem. A person also I regard as a friend. But what's interesting is that Mr. Jordan did not attack me for not attacking this person that I'm thinking about. All right. Okay. I'll just say, I'm not even gonna bother to say it, because it's just piling stuff on stuff. All right. I'll just leave that there. All right. My point is, he has a habit of praising non-black public officials, but when it looks like the person's African American, he takes on this lens of, it's kind of a Johnny Law lens, right? Johnny Law, Johnny Law, Johnny Law, I'm gonna get you, man. Oh, you wrong. Okay. I mean, I think we've had a little too much of that. I mean, it's so bad, this lens that guides our society to a degree, unfortunately, that that is uh you watch a show like Blue Bloods, or Law and Order is even a better example. They will put their hands on a black guy just in general purpose, like, oh, you did this, I saw you this, right? And they just manhandle them. But they won't do that to somebody white. They'll question them. And I was saying to my mother, who likes these law enforcement chores as do I, but I'll be honest with you. And after George Floyd, I started looking at everything a lot differently. Yeah, it took that much, okay? And one thing I looked at is I thought, you know what? We are in a middle of a reckoning of how we, as a society, have engineered the system that quite literally does frame us as people that, in point of fact, we're not. And by action takes our rights away from us. You're not supposed to put your hands on somebody just because they're black and male. I don't care if and you think they did something wrong. Yeah, I understand that we got, what is it, stop and frisk and all that, but stop and frisk, as you can tell, is been taken out of use. There's a reason for that, because a lot of innocent black men were being ensnared by that. So I'm saying this to Mr. Jordan and others who think it's okay to have that lens. Take that lens off. All right. It's not, it might, some of us, I'm going to say, some of us who adopt that think that it makes us better with a white person. All right. Oh, they'll like me because I'm more law and order than they are. There are some of us who think that. Okay. There are some of us who think that. That's wrong. That is really wrong. All right. So I hope that when people watch this, it makes them think about what our society is doing to us, to each other, including our structures, including our media. I was saying to a friend of mine earlier today. Look, the real media out there are people who are influencers. YouTube, Instagram, primarily, who have gigantic followings and much larger than traditional media. Meanwhile, traditional media is dying and they're rising. There's a reason for that. On top of the fact that traditional media just seems to want to not copy what they do, but just to demonize them and say, oh, well, we're credible and they're not. And then you actually look at the traditional media and you realize they're not credible either. And they have a small footprint. Okay. And they've done a lot of damage to society, because there was a time when you could watch just a handful of channels to get your news. Now it should be okay to go to different places to get your news, because you should have different perspectives, different flavors, right? Different views. And those views should argue with each other, because out of that, I think we get a better idea of what's right and what's wrong, especially today. Because we're in a country where some people, look, I'm not a person who has ever smoked marijuana. I might come from a generation where if you saying marijuana, you had to say it under your breath, right? But we're in the middle of a great wrenching, a great shaking up of society, where in a number of places it's legal. And then we have people who are into psychedelic drugs, but they're all white. And what I was trying to point out, some people got upset with me. A lot of people got upset with me in the Oakland context, or who were white. Hey, they're saying, well, you shouldn't be saying that this is like a racist issue. But it is, because the way the needs of white psychedelic drug users were met in terms of legal trains with such rapidity in Oakland was just shocking, compared with the amount of time it has taken for Oakland to get the right police reforms, like taking out, or the state, like taking out the chokehold just this year. All right. If that was a white problem, it would have been solved faster. That's what I was trying to say. If you don't like that point of view, do the world a favor. Look at the whole of what we are doing. There is a reason we got George Floyd, and I don't want to be in a situation where somebody comes back later with something more heinous happens, and we're all looking around and saying, what happened? I'm trying to tell you what's going on. I am asking you to listen. Mr. Jordan has a track record of this kind of like law and order thing that comes off as like, he's very quick to criticize anybody that points out racism against blacks. Not a good thing. Okay? When he wants to come on my show and talk about racism, hey, I will pay him. All right? Open door. Because these are things that we need to talk about so we can move forward and build a better society. He's on 100 Black Men. Some of the brothers that are on there, some of the finest people I've ever met. All right? So, but we need a closing of the ranks. And the only way you get an effective closing of the ranks in our society, in Oakland, among us, among Black folks too, is to talk. I don't mean the Facebook thing where you do the texting. I mean real talk. All right, guys. Hey, and your comments, I got your comments here. Raiders SP says, hey, Zinni. Comics on the Men says, bingo. And Raiders says, yep, the system is designed for us to fail. They make no room for people to change. Right. It's just, oh, you're a bad person. That's it. Oh, you're bad. But see, think about that, Raiders SPSP. People, we do this. Think psychologically, why are they doing this? Is it that they're so afraid of somebody figuring out what they did was bad? So they have to say, oh, you, you know what I mean? There's something up with that. There really is. All right. See you guys later. I gotta eat.